Instanced loot on the public test client means every person who opens a container in a PvP area gets a personal role, and players are already treating that like a green light to hunt everyone on their way out. Testers spell it out bluntly. You meet 3 to 4 people outside just waiting for you, get killed on your way out, and get robbed of your loot. That sentiment captures the pivot from chest denial to exit denial, and it's coming straight from people running stations on the PTC right now. The conversation has moved past the old one chest, one winner drama. PTC players describe long lab wars where control flips, people open in parallel, and then the whole thing reverses into a mass escort mission to get loot out safely. That line matters because it frames the new win condition. It's not about who gets the chest first, but actually getting living bodies with pockets full of loot through stairwells and doors and into the open without getting clipped. There's a tempo piece too. People tracking timers note fast repeated windows that reward chain running over squatting in one room. One tester put it simply, there's no reason to camp now. If you keep rerunning the dungeon, you can get fresh loot every 16 minutes. That rhythm fuels more collisions and more ambushes at exits because every chest respawn turns everyone into a target. Before this PTC patch goes live, there are currently 2 dominant meta strategies when going after schematics. The first meta strategy is arriving to an empty loot chest and then camping it while you wait for the loot to pop. That creates weird incentives to clock watch for loot refresh and or attempting to rat a chest by defeating the mobs hoping no one will discover you, and then again camping the chest for respawn. The other meta strategy that I see on my server, the Solution Bowl in North America, is that big groups lock down a single S-tier location for hours. They set up respawn bases near the front door and then they rerun the location over and over waiting for the loot to drop, while smaller or less skilled squads get erased. Players have been posting about full sieges and guild coalitions parking for the entire week on the best labs. Plus, the other issue has been that valuable loot spawns are being compressed into one point of interest, which concentrates that Zerg power even more. I've seen this on my server where the current dominant guild essentially kills new deep desert players over and over until they join them. Like, it's kind of crazy. If you join my server, you'll see my name all over the deep desert chat. Not because I'm ganking farmers or solo players, but because the dominant guild has literally bullied new deep desert players into keeping Tacit Mortem and his guild off the loot spawns. Or they'll just kill you over and over again until you join them. It's crazy work and mad toxic, but this is where Dune Awakening PvP is at least on my server. On the PTC, instanced PvP loot plus the new RNG based loot pools completely undercuts that hold one S tier loot drop location for the entire week strategy. Testers call out that the deep desert no longer boils down to only 1 or 2 POIs with great loot. Instead, with chance-based drops per chest location and no small weekly schematic rotation, literally every PvP station and shipwreck matters every week. The practical effect is that while controlling a single lab still has value, the equal opportunity for good loot across all PvP testing stations and static shipwrecks is greatly increased because desirable pieces aren't hard-gated to one chest on one deep desert layout. With instancing, the chest popping moment stops being the single point of failure. Players who've tested the new PvP loot flow report that camping loot locations is being replaced by planned escorts, precisely because value is now distributed across every location. Testers describe the interior as a staging ground rather than the finish line. You clear, you grab the loot, and suddenly your priorities invert. You keep people off the badge room, keeping them off the loot room, but only long enough to get you and your squad out in waves. An evening on the PTC is like 4 hours of non-stop PvP, with control, prevention, and then escape forming a repeating loop. That is a fundamentally different cadence than sitting on a 3-hour chest. The exit is where plans collapse or convert. PTC players call the stairwells to testing stations the new bottleneck, not because loot is scarce, but because timing a push after the loot drops can trap a team inside with no way out. That's how denial moves from chests to bodies. TLDR, until this patch goes live, the smartest move is to control the station until it pays. But after instancing and the loot pool rework, the smart move will become to control long enough for your team to get the loot and exit. And because there are more viable POIs to hit, and the time to loot respawn is now about 16 minutes, the goal will be shifted from camping one loot spawn. With these changes, the escape meta is shifting. On the PTC, squads are separating inside control from outside control. One tester explained the new meta like this. this. You circle the wreck in an ornithopter, you sweep it with a life scanner, and then you spam the entrance with rockets when the ground team starts moving outside. The outside roll is no longer the last resort. It's the lair that turns a risky stairwell into a window of safety long enough for those seeking to escape with loot to come outside. So if players make it past the interior stair team to the entrance, you can still take them out by having multiple rocket ornithopters there to finish the job. Another interesting change is that teams aren't all exiting at once. The practical tactic is to offset exits by a few seconds and split up, which forces enemy players to commit to taking out one or two of your teammates while the rest of your team slips out. That staggering of exits also protects your conversion rate if a Zerg jumps the few of you. You're not sacrificing everyone to the same choke point. Players are saying that this change is how a bad escape becomes expensive rather than a complete waste of time. Life scan discipline keeps you from walking blind into that trap. Once this patch drops, there will be much more emphasis on scanning not just the interior, but the entire surface as well before choosing to enter or exit. That quick information turns the exfil from a guess into a plan, and it pairs naturally with an orbiting scout ornithopter who can call enemy angles before you commit. The pattern's simple: confirm the presence, create noise at the entrance, and allow the rest to escape. A lot of would-be campers think just wait outside, but players doing this daily say the smarter ambush is staged mid-stair, or just beyond the last corner. The reason for this is forcing the exiting players to push up far enough to lose the loot room band, so the looters can't retreat into safety. That's the timing window people are practicing on the PTC, and it's the one you'll meet when this patch goes live. Having said that, exit campers are inevitable in an instanced world. Not because of laziness necessarily, but because now everyone has something to loot. The math changes when every player has schematics on them. Any player or squad wipe pays twice, once for your own instanced loot roll, and then again from what you take off enemy players. That attracts organized groups to doors and stairheads and punishes teams that try to leave in a single mob. Expect counter ambushes as standard. People are already talking about sending a runner who has dropped their schematics to spring the trap, then rotating the rest out on a delay. Others run off-cycle stations so their exits don't line up with enemy clocks. The common thread is forcing commitment, and on shipwrecks, overcommitting to one exit allows others to escape through the other exits. There are still benefits to zerging, but the specific benefit has changed. When 10 players each pull rolls, the value obviously goes up a ton for the whole group, and the change to the zerg benefit is that trying to camp a room forever becomes kind of pointless because fresh loot cycles respawn faster than fights will finish. PTC players are noting that the meta is using your numbers to hold space just long enough to peel out in waves. Solo players or smaller groups aren't locked out either. With multiple stations and shipwrecks in rotation, solos and duos can thrive by choosing timing and location rather than trying to pry a door away from a guild at peak times. The idea I'm seeing repeated for solo players are to arrive near the end of a clear, open last, and exit last. It's not glamorous, but a lot of solo players on the PTC are saying that this works. There's also some disagreement worth acknowledging. Some solo players say that instancing loot flattens their incentive because they can no longer scoop multiplayer loot drops while they're by themselves. And then others counter that the consistent ability to pull a loot drop without having to wait for a chest to pop makes soloing more predictable, even if the exfil risk remains. That tension will follow the patch to live. Reliability inside, danger outside. Another layer to this new PvP meta is the increased render distance to 2,000 meters, whether on the ground or in the air. This is a massive increase from the current 500 meter render distance, but the increase in render distance doesn't apply to weapon firing. So no, you can't just ancient way an ornithopter from 2k meters out. Players are already adjusting air rolls to this render distance increase. The outside pilot isn't hovering right in front of the entrance. Instead, air cover is holding a location offset to the entrance, calling threats early, and using rockets as a suppression tool when exit runners commit. Offsetting from the entrance makes it much harder for players exiting with ancient ways to stay locked onto you, and it opens exiting players to a barrage of rockets. The practical adjustments for exiting players are small but meaningful, with an increased importance on cutting line of sight under structures, and keeping your exiting player's final push to outside moment ambiguous for as long as possible. The goal of an air ambusher is a clean line to fire on as many players as possible, but the counter to that is to let them rocket spam until they overheat, then exit. Some PTC pilots are advocating using scanner passes from the air to mark life signs before the ground team commits. Others prefer a high, quiet glide path that keeps them out of common patrol altitudes. Both ideas converge on the same point. Air control is no longer a pointless aspect. It is a layer that converts air control to easier extractions. My predictions for day one once this patch goes live is to expect more smaller battles with faster interiors and longer exits. Testers who like the changes argue that fighting on the way out for bags is proper PvP, and that squatting on a chest is simply worse value than clearing again on the next cycle. That attitude creates rolling collisions in corridors and stairwells, and the chance-based loot pools drastically reduces the incentive to sit on one S-tier loot room forever. Anticipate more mid-stair ambushes synchronized to when players push up far enough to lose their loot room band. My advice to would-be gankers is to avoid showing up too early, and to penetrate only when retreat is impossible, meaning you wait for those trying to exit to lose their loot room band before you attack heavy. Counter tactics to that are staggering your loot pickups, splitting exit doors for shipwrecks, and staggering exits to the outside that are timed to take advantage of ground enemy deaths and air-based enemy overheats. The combination of executing all of this will decide whether teams get to keep their loot. Finally, watch for a cultural split in-game. Some players like me will welcome the chaos, with 4-hour lab wars basically being all that I do in this game anyway. Other PTC testers are warning that the increased pressure players will feel not right away, but when trying to exit, will feel brutal, especially to PvE-focused players who wander south looking for easy loot. That debate won't change the upcoming meta I just went over. It will shape which servers see organized combat versus opportunistic hit and runs. The keys will be timing, info on enemy locations and numbers, and the basic truth that every player now has loot, so every single player is now worth a fight. When loot is instanced, the chest is no longer a jackpot lever, it's a starting gun. The moment people grab loot, the potential value increases across the entire squad, and the game rewards whoever treats the exit like the main objective rather than an afterthought. The discussions I've seen in the PTC point to one lesson over and over. The team that controls the exit corridor wins more than the team that merely reaches the loot. Players are already building habits that fit this new world. One person scanning while another watches angles, a pilot orbiting instead of being non-existent, staggering exits at the door instead of a single large push, and exit choices that give you the chance to get away. None of that requires perfect aim, it requires respecting the importance of perfect timing. Chain running all labs and shipwrecks beats camping one location for most groups, which will probably end up being the single biggest change outside of instanced loot. And every fight at the exit is a showcase on whether your squad planned the last 30 meters to exit carefully enough to escape. That's where instanced loot turns PvP from a coin flip into a craft. Thanks for watching this breakdown of the upcoming changes to PvP in Dune Awakening. If this video helped you, make sure to drop a like, share it with your squad, follow and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what you think about these changes. I read and respond to every single one. I also multi-stream Dune Awakening multiple nights a week across 7 different platforms, so you can find me live on all major platforms. Finally, if you're looking for a squad to play with, join my Dune Awakening guild Unhinged. We have sweaty PvPers like me, and we also have a large number of players who focus on farming, crafting, building, and the economy. Both styles matter to us and both get supported. You'll get steady groups, posted runtimes, and people who actually help you improve. If you're new to the deep desert or you're already lethal, there's a place for you here. Head to unhinged.gg and sign up. Check the description for the link. Make sure to tag Tacit Mortem in your application so I can get you into the next PvP run. Finally, and as always, remember, it's only GG when you win.